Hello, I'm Bianca Reed, and welcome to the Convey Culture podcast, a podcast where we explore emerging generations, diverse lives, and how culture and identity impact society, career, and business. If you've loved the content we've done before this, or this is your very first time listening, please don't hesitate to like, subscribe, engage. We like culture and conversations and feedback. So, in today's episode, I always look forward to anything that's about media because media has such an impact on our culture, representation, how we see ourselves reflected, not just in the United States, but really on a global landscape. And I also love when we have founders who build their own really cool businesses. So, today I have Randi Matthews with me from Multi-Media. Welcome, Randi.
Thank you. Thank you. So excited to be here.
Oh, I'm happy to have you. These are the kind of conversations I love jumping into. I do this with every guest because I feel like no one tells your story better than you. So, how would you describe yourself to a stranger, and what's a friendly stranger? And what's the most important things for us to know about you?
Oh, that's a great question. I love how the questions about strangers. I have a 5-year-old and I have been teaching him about stranger dangers. So this is really a complex question for me these
Right?
days.
Like, not too much. We don't need your address, but like, how would you do it?
Let's see. I am a mother. I am a wife. I am a marketing professional, a CEO, and a founder. I'm also a documentarian, and I really like to consider myself a great friend.
I like that description. I love when people don't lead with their careers. I feel like American culture is like, I'm a this, and you want a really title. Like, I'm a mom, and I feel like I love to lead with, I'm a mom, and it's the best decision and the most exhausting decision I've ever made.
Oh,
But it's
yes, both of those things.
now you have built an incredible business, and I feel like a lot of times in this industry, you have these breakthrough moments that kind of got you to where you are. But you've had the chance to work with some really incredible celebrities, some really cultural influencers in our community and beyond. So, can you give a little insight into that journey, how you got there, and even if you feel like sharing a little nugget of information on how you've been able to kind of build that relationship with some of your celebrity cultural influencers?
Yeah, well, I've been in this industry for the better part of 19 years. I started out in New York. I live in LA now and really just kind of hustling to figure out what I wanted to do. And I ended up at a global management firm and an assistant and kind of worked my way up. And that was kind of like my first taste of like, oh, I really like entertainment. I really love working with cultural moments. At the time, I was doing more sports. Um, and then my career has kind of taken a lot of twists and turns with entertainment and crisis counseling and social media and influencer marketing. Um, and I just got to a point because I worked inside of agencies for so long that it really felt very clear to me that agencies were not built for me. Um, and especially not built for me to succeed in the way that I saw envisioned for myself. And back to motherhood, when I had my son, I was like, I can do better for him and I can do better for us. And that was really a touch point where I was like, culturally, as a woman and a Black woman in America, and I already have built all these resources and I already have all these relationships, I can figure out how to do it on my own. And that's really where I kind of started building my, like, I have like my in system network and my out of system network, which some are the same, but it really has taken a different shape and form. And I've really begun to cultivate that. So probably about 5 years ago.
Wow. And I hear this story a lot, and I echo that same story where you feel like as a mom, the agency life is challenge. I also feel like the agency life is going to evolve quite a bit with AI and some of the other things. Like, if there's ever a time to lean into culture and the pulse of what's happening over kind of some of the things that agencies do, I think now is the ultimate moment. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Do you feel in influencer marketing, because that feels like it's already evolved so much since maybe 4 or 5 years ago? What do you see as some of the biggest changes within influencer marketing?
So I think the biggest change is that anybody can be an influencer. It used to be when I first started, which we didn't call it influencer marketing at the time. It was mostly celebrity or people who had amassed large audiences. Now, I mean, there's micro influencers. There's you know people who are experts in their field. There are advocates, there are celebrity influencers, there are digital native influencers. I think that's the biggest change is like I could hop on TikTok tomorrow and have a video that goes viral and become an influencer. And that's really exciting and also very noisy in the marketplace.
It's terrifying too. I know for brands, it's what just happened with lotion company. They did that Super Bowl commercial, and a black influencer's like, "Hey, you stole that idea from me. Like it originated from me." But I think what we're running into that's a challenge, and I don't disagree that I feel like so much that black people do is pour into culture, and then that's kind of captured by brands and other people, and maybe not treated valued, and then we don't see the value for us on the other end of it. But it's also hard because when something goes viral, how long do you own the rights to that idea or that content or that inspiration? And I think you see that a lot now, and it's interesting on TikTok when you're trying to credit the originator of something, how much that has gotten to be a challenge. So do you find that when working with brands, is it getting more and more challenging to kind of originate ideas or find kind of that cultural impact? Because everyone will say, I just want to go viral.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation going on.
Stop telling people that. That's how rich you'd be with a magic viral wand. Like, here I go.
It's interesting. I've come across it quite a bit in my career, especially when it's things that have originated from Black and Brown communities and a brand wants to capitalize on it and just wants to hire whoever the biggest influencer is at the time doing that thing. I think what's interesting about where I sit in the landscape of influencer marketing brand opportunity is that there are very few people of color that have that level of influence, if you will. I always say I'm kind of like an invisible influencer. A lot of what I do is research and trending and knowing who's who and what's what behind the scenes so that I can counsel and advise my clients. A lot of the counsel I give is also very culturally relevant and led because that's who I am. It's a part of who I show up as in the world. And so I think that cultural competence comes in really handy. A lot of times I'm able to map back to the originator of the trend or the viral moment or things like that. Where it gets tricky is if the brand wants to follow through on where I'm able to lead them, right? And I think that's the bigger conversation. For me, it's finding it, giving them the information, giving them the counsel, and then, trying to push them in the right direction. But every brand does not want to take that counsel. And I think that has to be more on the onus of brands to do the right thing and to engage in the spaces where they're not necessarily seeing the biggest numbers, but they probably will see the biggest impact.
That is a hard thing in agency life to get that safe choice. And I think a lot of the reasons we don't see the inclusion we should of people of colors, despite so much data and so much research and brands like Nike who've proven it year over year over year that leaning into culture makes an impact. There's such a hesitance to do that, to like take a risk on someone or not even a risk. I give you data to show this probably isn't risky, but it's amazing how much they feel safe with what they think they know and don't want to actually lean into the data. So I love that you mentioned data and research.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important. It goes hand in hand with culture, right? It's like you want to use this cultural touch point. Let me show you how it can ladder back to your business. Because really, everybody's about the bottom line, right? Every brand wants to make money. So let's figure out how we do that and also stay true to the origins of what you're trying to do.
See, and I love that. What do you feel is the superpower of multi-media? Like if you could say, this is the superpower for brands to work with us, what do you feel that is?
I really think it's the collaboration and the preparedness that I put forward. Also, my experience. I've been in the industry for a really long time, but I've been on the talent side and I've been on the brand side. So I have a superpower in understanding both, which very few people can say, especially at the level that I've done it. I also provide a level of transparency that I think a lot of influencer and like entertainment marketing agencies don't provide. I'm a strong believer in everybody understanding the goals at hand and understanding where your dollar goes and why it's going there and how it shows up in a B2B or a B2C space. And I think that's a superpower because everybody doesn't know how to translate that to their clients.
I agree. And even capturing that cultural moment is incredible. So you've worked with celebrities, Missy Elliott for one of them, which I feel like Missy Elliott doesn't always get credit for the amount of impact she's had on culture, from fashion, music. I don't even think people realize how many of other people's songs she's written and
Yeah.
contributed to it. It's fascinating. People are like, oh, I can't stand the rain. I'm like, do you know how much other stuff she's done? Like, why would you think that's the one thing? But what are some of the cool stories you have around working with talent in that space? Or even what does it feel like to kind of be in that with working with that level of talent?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately they're just people, right? And I think I have had the best success when I treat them as such.
Mhm.
And so, I've had some really big campaigns with like, Doritos or Pepsi or things like that we've created content for and around. Some of my more fun campaigns was, I don't even know if you remember, and this was really back in the day, but we worked with one of the first kid creators. His name was Kid President.
Yes, I do. I'm
And
40. I can go back to the
okay,
memories.
so he was so fun and kind of a breath of fresh air. He was also really at the tip of what we call influencer marketing now, especially as it pertains to like content geared towards children. Um, but I think like for me, I try to be less in the limelight and more in the place where I am creating a safe space for the brand and the talent to have the best and most optimal um, time to shine, if that makes sense. So I try to make talent really comfortable. And I try to stay ahead of whatever the brand needs are. And in doing that in that pocket, I've had a lot of success.
That feels right. I feel like whenever I've gone to shoots or interacted with talent, you forget how human they are. Like they're human. They get cold. They worry about things. They feel
Yeah.
uncomfortable, and I even feel like
Don't
they're on
don't
the
let that fool
lenses.
you.
Like
Don't let
what?
me fool you. There are still diva
Oh, they're
and those types of personalities. But I would say by and large, people really respond to being taken care of, feeling like they understand what's happening around them, why we've hired them, why they are important to the scenario, and why they're, spending 6 hours with us on whatever day they're doing. So I feel like, that doesn't always hold true, but I would say more often than not.
I would say, and you want to give people the benefit of like, I'm going to treat you this first before I see your crazy writer and your diva tendencies. We'll treat you. I've seen writers from like, you want what? Like,
Yeah.
who does that for you? But okay, sure. It's funny in the world. So then you're also doing work with NIL, and I was a former college athlete, and I had a previous guest, and we talked a lot about how crazy it is, how much NIL has evolved, because I grew up where I couldn't do anything. You couldn't have someone buy you a sandwich, nothing. And then to see these athletes who are being gifted cars,
I know.
especially track and I ran track and field. And so you to get anything in track and field is like lucky you. And so
Yep.
how are you seeing this opportunity in NIL and the shift of a whole new influencer culture there?
Well, first of all, we're kindred spirits because I ran D1 track as
Just
well.
do on track and field. See, and that's
Yeah.
why you're in business. I tell people you're a good business person.
That's right. It definitely shaped a lot of who I am. I think like being able to multitask, being a leader, a group participant, and also I think like I was a captain for several years, so like you build a lot of those types of skills. But I digress on that. I think
We can go into that. What events did you do?
I was a sprinter jumper, so I ran the 100, 200, and I did the long jump.
Oh, same. I didn't do jumps. I was 100 through 800. They made you
Oh,
run
okay.
everything
Woo.
inside. Yeah,
Woo.
I know.
I wasn't trying to run nobody's 800.
Oh, the 400 to this day, my kids run it, and I'm like, listen, they complain to me, and I'm like, I know it hurts. I know it does, but it's less
Literally.
than a minute of pain. Imagine if I told you you only get a minute on the video game. You would tell me, like, Mom, it's too short.
Right.
It's only a minute. You
Well,
got
that's a great way to explain it. I love that.
it. Yeah, it's like they need a connection to why pain. They're like, I can't take it. And I'm like, it's less than a minute of your time. You'll be okay.
That's true. Oh man, that's great. I think in terms of like NIL, and I'm really at a point where, so over the years, people have hit me up all the time asking like, how do I grow my brand? How do I, we're now in the place where like we can accept money, and how does that work for my son or daughter in, inside of their collegiate responsibilities? And so I think NIL is really interesting. I mean, I can't imagine when I was in college being given a car
I know.
and like what that means and does to me as an athlete, as a student athlete, as a person in that time and space. So I think there's just so much opportunity to educate and guide these kids in a way that I don't think are getting currently. And that's really where I have a larger vested interest, which is, thinking about my 19-year-old self getting up at 6 to go to weights and then maybe having to run to do a photo shoot or run to finish a piece of content and have my deliverables uploaded, and I still have to do homework, and I did work study, and like, how are we building that for success? How are we building that for wealth? How are we building that for longevity for the future of these athletes, whether they're going to go on and be superstars or not? I think, full transparency, there's a lot of work that needs to be done that is just now getting started.
I feel like the NCAA, and this isn't against them, but they took so much years of profiting off these athletes that I also feel like they own the responsibility of doing a better job with business education. I've been talking to a lot of athletes who are like, I don't get business management. I don't know anything about taxes. Like, a gift still means you're taxed on that gift. Can you afford to be like, can you even afford to take this gift?
Absolutely.
And I think they don't educate. And so then and also, it's also causing this interesting balance in sports where people aren't trying to go pro because you have NBA pays less than NIL athletes make.
Absolutely.
So it's shifting the whole culture of sport quite a bit as well.
I kind of liken it to when I first got into influencer marketing, and let's be very clear, influencer marketing is still not regulated the way that it should be. But we've made a lot of strides. I think NIL is at a similar space and time where it's still very much the wild, wild west. And it's going to take a lot of people who've been in the process, who understand what it means to be an athlete, that mindset, but also managers and brand people and educators to come together and really create a path for, I guess, success for these athletes. Really, you best utilize best practices for the NIL deals.
And I feel like now it's trickling into high school. I see all over TikTok and all over different social media channels this pressure of like high schoolers, like, you got to build your brand now. You have to build your brand in this space. And even my kids who they're like, are you not posting anything? You won't like, and I feel like that is also becoming an impact in who gets recruited, because that means money for the school and attention for the school. So you've shifted it from college to it becoming now a high school industry, and these AAU coaches are making videos. So it is having an interesting cultural trickle-down effect. And I still don't think not all high schoolers need to be on the internet at that level.
No. And there's all sorts of other legislation being passed as well about when you can engage in an NIL deal with a high school athlete or someone who maybe is being in the process of being recruited, or at what point are they accepting their admission to a specific college. So there's just so many things, loose ends that people don't know yet. Right. And that's what's exciting about it, honestly. It's like there's just so many things and opportunities that could come of it.
I do love that for the athletes. I would say overall, I feel like it's positive, because I remember doing sports modeling in high school, and then when I got to college, they were like, oh no, you can't touch any of this. And I remember feeling like, but you're ripping me off from like what money I've earned. And so it's an interesting dynamic to see these high school kids able to do that and build wealth early. Like, that's exciting, but it is, I think overall to be good once we can get to your point, we don't have social media legislated yet. So I feel like our government has a really hard time moving at the pace of innovation. That's a challenge to do.
That is a challenge. And NCAA historically has, I wouldn't say favored student athletes. So I also think there's going to have to be a lot of reform there as well.
Yeah, I also think that NCAA has also favored certain sports very aggressively over others. So it's also fascinating to see, even like gymnastics is suddenly getting more attention in NIL than you would ever have seen historically from the NCAA. And so it's fascinating to watch the impact of sports they didn't think were that cool or important or however now getting credit. And as much as I think the top influencers are in gymnastics right now over football, even some of the NIL deals.
Yeah, it's really cool to see how and also the elevation of women athletes, which is also something fascinating and amazing, and definitely a shift in the way that athletes and athletics has been promoted.
I agree. I get emotional even seeing like these women athletes getting a platform because I was explaining to my daughter, I'm like, we did not get that same kind of platform. You did not get that same sort of credibility. Even for basketball, you're seeing equal airtime and you're seeing higher viewership with women's basketball. And I'm like, that is a huge step. That feels massive to watch that improvement in this generation of athletes.
Yeah, it's cool. And I mean, I think it's one of those things too. And what is it? The Women's World Cup had the most viewership internationally than any other sports, program ever has. So like, even that, having the onset of that and having people realize that women can deliver viewership in a way that they never thought that they could before is a really cool thing.
It is. I'm super excited for this year's Olympics. I think it'll be a much more equitable year than you've seen historically on some of the viewership between women and men, and it gives them a platform to ask for more and negotiate for more. So
Yeah,
I'll be happy about that. Okay, so how is being a mother? I know that when you're in marketing and in media, I feel like I do want my kids to engage in social. I feel like you have to learn it responsibly, but then also I also have this like I know the inside baseball of it. So as a mother, I'm like, oh, do you really? And like it kind of like you kind of feel so. How's being a mom changed your feelings about social media? And you have a 5-year-old, but is it gross?
I was gonna say my kid's still pretty young, so he's just looking on my social media at
Yeah.
this point. Mommy, I want to see that. Scroll back. But also hearing that development of language, he knows how to scroll and he knows how to stop on a image and knows how to turn the volume up, and which is crazy to think that like that's just native to him at this point. Listen, I work in social media all day, every day. I'm pretty steeped in it, and there's positive and negatives to it. I think we can all agree. I think if you're teaching positive habits to your children, um, you have a far better chance of them using the internet and social platforms more responsibly. And I think it's just continuing to check in and making sure that, like we're all guilty of being on. I mean,
Right.
I doom scroll all the time. Like I have to stop myself from doing it. So I think being proactive and setting boundaries and just having conversations about it and also letting your kids know that you're figuring it out too. It's not just, you shouldn't do this. It's mommy's figuring that out too, and let's do it together. And it's not going to be perfect. I think that's the biggest thing. And, social media, innovation, internet, AI, all of those things are great tools. And with that kind of power, there always has to be some sort of regulatory practice on the other side of it.
Agreed. I think it's even as an adult, to your point about doom scrolling, I feel like being in marketing and you have to pay attention, but there are times when I'm like TikTok, there's something about that algorithm that just pulls me in where I'm like watching it, and it's not, to your point, I'm learning things or I'm seeing different destinations in the world. So there's great things about it, and I live in Oklahoma because my husband's in the Air Force, and so I'm like, I want to see what's happening outside of Oklahoma. So it's like to me a window to the world, and I also think it's caused for a more inclusive generation of teenagers because they're being exposed to the world. So how does it feel for you, kind of that experience in social media? Do you feel like you still get pulled into buying? Has it changed your social media habits at all?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely I've been trying to limit my social to for personal to
Yes.
like morning sometimes I'll scroll and evening sometimes I'll scroll. I send a lot of um pieces of content to my husband, which I'm sure he
Yes.
could do. So I'm sure he would probably have some ideas on how much I use or don't use social media. But I would say in general, I'm a lot more aware of when I'm on it and how I use it, how do I utilize it. I do think I do a lot of education, I'll do a lot of reading, I do a lot of listening. And I think that's I don't do a lot of reading like books as much as I should these days. So I get a lot of my information from social media. So I think making sure that I'm fact checking, making sure that I'm following quality accounts and those types of things, I would say I'm way more mindful about how
Yes.
often I'm on my phone, especially with my son, because he's noticing if I'm paying attention, what's active versus passive. Um, you know, uh what's the word I want to use? presentation or how I'm in showing up for him.
Yes.
So I think those types of things really shape my social media usage and how I choose to, utilize it throughout my day.
Wait till they're teenagers and they call you out on it. So I'm like, get off your phone. Like, you're on your phone. I'm like, I
Yeah.
know, but so it's
Right.
hard
And
to.
he will too. He'll be like,
Yeah.
he doesn't know that. He'll be like, Mom, are you on a call? I'm like, no, I'm not on a call.
No, but it's good. It's spicy today. I want to keep going. The algorithm is good. Like, I know. They'll call me out on it. And they're at the age where I can DM them things. So now I'll be DMing, like, I'll DM my husband something and I'll DM my son, like, Harry Potter jokes. And it's like, Mom, you're so cool.
That's a form of bonding too that
Yeah.
never existed previously. It's like you can engage in content that everyone is going to like and enjoy, and gives you conversations topics.
Does.
One of the things that I've been talking about more recently is sustainable social, which is kind of the life cycle of how social shows up in your life, especially from a brand perspective, which is that you want to engage in more community focused, intentional,
Yes.
marketing that ultimately can live in real life as well. And that way you're naturally creating a more cyclical balance of like the time people spend online versus the time people spend offline.
I love that. So talk more about that in application. Like, are you thinking, I'm in my mind, I guess goes to, I've seen community food cooking programs and then they bring in a brand, but what's some kind of real life application?
So even thinking about, I'm working with a company right now and they have a game that they're promoting. The game has a real life application. You can play it in real life. So even as something as simple as that, you create a social and online presence. You can create a traditional influencer campaign. Maybe you create some sort of a organization or forum for the conversation to talk about how do you play the game, or when do you play the game? Do you play with your family? Ancillary topics of conversation. And then you can drive people to an IRL, as the kids say, in real life version of that, where they're playing the game with the friends, maybe the community that they've built online. And maybe the community shows up and they have meetups or games or things like that. I mean, that's a really simplistic form of it, but I think it can happen in all sorts of ways. And just being proactive about how you're setting up the ecosystem from social to real live events, pop-ups, concerts, whatever. I think it's just being intentional by a brand or an entity to create a pathway that people can like actively see on and offline activations.
I love that because we do a lot of studies on like Gen Z and millennials, and we like engagement. We want real world experiences. And I think one of the great examples of this is book talk. Like, I'm amazed at how much you see these series of like book talks, and Audible's doing a really smart campaign right now, I think, where they talk about a preview of the book like it's a little bit of real life, and then it's pulling you in this engagement. But then they also have these options where you can like join a group to discuss it, and if you read it, and so it makes you have a community. And it does make social media feel like a less lonely experience, or you're kind of being pulled in. And so I love that idea. I've seen it with pickleball, where they have online games and you're pulled into this pickleball experience. So more of how we can create that. I love that. Sustainable. I'm going to remember that. Sustainable social media. Because what a powerful tool for connecting people that we maybe don't leverage in the way we could.
I completely agree. And I think that's the goal. And I think that should be the onus on creators, influencers, brands when they're creating these social moments, is to really think through the journey for the consumer and how that can look for them in a intentional and healthy way.
Agreed. And you say a healthy way because there is really great things. We follow this. I'm going to forget his name. I'm going to post it later because he's incredible. But he is a Black aerospace scientist, and he's incredible. And he's a big influencer. I'm pretty sure he has traction. But his representation and education, I'm like, you have to follow him, because I tell my kids, like, look at this whole world, and he's still cool, and he has tattoos, and he's like, so it's this, not that I'm like advocating for tattoos, but it's just like seeing representation in a space that they may not consider from a career thing. I think social has such powerful things. It's just in how we use it and how we choose. All right, we're going to get into rapid fire, which never ends up being rapid fire, but that's okay. So, in the rapid fire, first question. If you could work with any brand, and you may have already worked with them, but is there a dream brand that you could work with? Who would it be?
Oh, gosh. A lot of the work that I really want to do is around impact. So this is not a brand so much as like an entity that does really amazing work, which is St. Jude.
Yes.
And I have always really wanted to take my marketing and influencer and social media skills and really put it to good use for organizations like that. And just like, they do a great job. I mean, St. Jude is crushing it, but I just could see so many other uh, applications of how they show up in the world. And I feel like that would just be like a home run for me and like where my sensibilities stand.
Oh, I love that because it really is. You see a lot of organizations similar to that where there's a give back element, but they really could leverage some of the tools of marketing to really kind of have a greater impact or reach a new audience. This is why it's not rapid fire because I keep running my mouth. But I often find nonprofits, whenever I do work with nonprofits, it's like they don't want to delve into and use some of the modern marketing tools. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
there's nothing wrong with that. People want to give back and support and engage. And so for you to like put that wall up and say we're only going to do TV or we're only going to do radio means you're missing out on a group that want to engage a younger audience that are very
Absolutely.
philanthropic.
Yeah. So I think for me, anything in that line and I mean, I just felt so much heart for what the work that they do and the good that they do for these families in need. And, that's really where a lot of my passion comes from in terms of like the work that I do.
But if you could work with one celebrity and you get to one you get to collaborate with and just do an event with or collaborate in any way that you see fit, and then one you just want to meet and have a conversation to get advice from.
I would say the same person. It's Michelle Obama.
Oh, I know, me too.
She's my
Like,
best friend in my head. Oh, you know who else I really love?
like I'm
Oh my gosh. See, look,
low key.
words again. I told you.
I'm telling you, I go to her little things and I'm like, just pour into me, all of you. She's incredible. She really is.
And I would say someone who I really want to kiki with is
Yeah.
Michelle Buteau. I feel like we're like sisters from another mister and we have the same sense of humor. And I haven't had the opportunity to work with her, but I just love the work that she does.
And I think your kids are the same age. I think hers are
Yeah,
5. This sounds stalkerish, but I'm like, I think her kids
but
are
I
the
already
same.
knew it. So who's the
Like,
sophomore?
no, I'm like, she's incredible. Her show just got renewed, and I was like, yes, I
No,
want this for you. I was happy for you. You don't know someone, and you're like, girl, yes, I've been rooting for you. I'm like, this woman wouldn't know me from Adam, but just so you know, I'm on your team, girl. I feel that way.
call me.
Come on, I'm here. If they ever need me, I'm ready. I'm going to do a quick divergent. What are your thoughts on this Beyonce entry into country? It's not really entry. She's done country off and on, but like kind of that influence. And then at the same time, releasing the also new hair brand and making it completely inclusive. I just saw her new ad today and
It is extremely inclusive.
one product for all. And I was like, oh, this was well done. Like you did that. Your thoughts, because you're in media.
So I think her foray into country shouldn't be unexpected. I mean, she had daddy issues on her last album and or previous albums. She's from Texas. Like, I felt like it was only a matter of time before she put out a country album. Honestly, she's been extremely innovative in her career. She's always trying something new. With whether it's visual albums, drops at midnight, or she's just always kind of setting a precedent for how people show up in the industry. And I think this is just another version of that.
So good. I'm just impressed. And also, I was like I shouldn't say this, I don't need the Beehive to come for me, but I was so on her last album. It just wasn't as much as my vibes. I feel like this album and Lemonade were like my two where I was like more, more, more. So I'm really excited for this.
Yeah, it's great. And then I think in terms of her hair brand, I think, listen, she's had a lot of businesses with fashion and perfumes and things like that. I think she does well. I think really what's going to set her apart in the hair care industry, because it is so crowded, is connectivity. How does she connect with her audiences in a different way than she has in like music and industry? I think that's going to be the telltale sign of how well she does.
There's always this argument, and I'm not saying I'm here for it, but she doesn't have a great brand outside of music, is what you often hear that conversation. Like that's where she struggles with the perfume, or it's because it's like, in a way, she's so private, which is great, be private, but then there's not a brand connection. So I'm excited that with the launch of the hair, you felt there was a little more intimacy about the way she described hair and kind of the partnership and the journey. So I'm excited to see where this goes.
Agreed. I agree with that.
Okay. What are the least three? Oh, I have to redo this. What are the least likely 3 words someone would use to describe you? So least likely, they would never say these things about you. That's a hard one.
That is a hard one.
It always gets people. This one always, because they're like, how would you describe? You can do it with the least likely.
The least likely. I don't think anybody would ever describe me as selfish, except for my husband, because I don't share my food with him. That would be the only thing. I don't think people would ever use the word like gatekeeper for me. I am open book, freely give information, and I think that's how it should be. And I don't think anybody would ever use the word mean-spirited for me. I really try to live in a way that makes people feel valued and at the very minimum welcomed.
Yes, good human energy. Those are good human energy descriptions. I love that. Oh, I love you did a good job with that one. You came up with 3 good ones. Sometimes I'm like pulling it out of people where I'm like, come on, you know what people wouldn't describe.
It was harder than I thought it was going to be.
It was. It takes you a minute. You just sit and be like, ooh, what could I do?
I probably could have come up with better ones, but I'll live with
those. Those are good ones. I feel like those are really good ones.
Thank you.
What are your favorite content sources? We talked about social media. I feel like YouTube is on all the time at my house, no matter what. Someone's always on it.
My content sources, I don't know. I am on Instagram frequently. It's just because it's easy for me, and I'm lazy because I am always on social for my clients. So I find it's just easy for me to get on Instagram and just do what I need to do. I'm trying to think. I use Discord to talk with some of my younger employees.
It's a good one.
We do a lot of like messaging and things through that, so I feel like that's helpful because it gives me the opportunity to learn and understand the platform, but also engage with them where they're at. And I still watch good old-fashioned TV.
Really? Still? Are you not a cord cutter?
I mean, I do. I use my parents' cable. Yes, I still do use my parents' cable. But I use their apps. So they have cable and I use their apps.
I was like asking people like, do you watch? Right? Because we've been cord cutters for a while, but then when something big comes on, I'm like, who has regular TV so we can watch it? It's like,
I mean, I use Netflix and Hulu. I have all of the traditional or whatever platforms as well. But it's cool to still watch like live TV and see what people see real time.
I never have to see commercials. I forgot, although I feel like YouTube is getting so much commercial, I'm about to just pay for premium. But watching the Super Bowl with my kids was really fascinating because like commercials like that, they don't see as much. So they're engaging around it, and the discussion that came out of it was fascinating to kind of see. You forget what a cultural impact that commercials do have as well.
I actually thought the Super Bowl commercials were really great this year.
Good this year. That was a big improvement. I was even the one that the church did. I was wondering where that was going when it first came on. I was like, that was one that got me to completely stop, look, find it. So I think it's fascinating some of the more inclusive approaches you saw this Super Bowl over past Super Bowls.
Yeah, I agree with that too. It was definitely conversational. I was with my mother and my sister, my husband, and also my nephews who are 13. And similar to you, I'm sure the conversations were really interesting about what they thought versus what we thought.
We had a lot of conversations about what we thought about it, but then also my son was like, how do you feel? Like, you're in inclusive marketing. This is a big step for like that kind of industry, like I say industry, but the industry of church to even lean into that. And I was like, and he's like, in this Super Bowl, like I felt like we saw more representation. And so from that perspective, I felt proud of our industry for moving into that. And it also gave more advocacy to be like, your brand will not fall apart if you lean into culture and if you're more authentic, you'll be all right. Like, I think it reinforced some of the things that a lot of brands are scared to do.
And I want to congratulate
Go ahead.
I want to congratulate your son for realizing that, and also congratulating you on knowing what he knows what you do for a living.
We've been working on that because I feel like in raising sons, and even with my daughter, it's important that they have an idea. They really believe in equity in like marriage and equity in marriage. I'm like, here's what I do. Here's what your dad does. We're super transparent as parents. Like, here's how much this costs. Your vacation costs this much. Here's how much we had to work for it. Because I feel like parents, I do coaching with like a lot of college students, and I feel like parents do their kids such a disservice by not being transparent about what life is about. I'm like, be transparent. You give your kids the ultimate shock when they go to college and they're like, what? Food doesn't just fill in my refrigerator?
Oh,
like, no.
so true. It's so true.
All right. Okay, see, this is why I say it's never rapid fire. We kind of talked about this, but if you devoted your life to a social impact cause for the rest, like you didn't have to work and you were just a philanthropist, what would be your social impact cause?
Well, I talked about St. Jude, which is like my near and dear impact organization, but mentorship in general as a whole, I would say, and especially mentorship of BIPOC women specifically, but BIPOC and, I would say underserved communities. I think like I grew up in a space where I didn't even know that what I did was a thing. I've stumbled into it over my life. And I think one of the things that I do well is understand opportunity. But a lot of people don't have access to some of the things that I was able to just, eke my way into. And then once I got into the industry, nobody was really checking for me. Nobody had a vested interest in where, my career was going to go or my longevity as a person or, and so I take that very seriously. I do a lot of mentorship. I'm in the process of wanting to create a mentor program from like Pipeline, specifically from junior colleges, because I think they are highly neglected. And so I think that's a place that I would spend a lot of time.
Ooh, if you do that, I'm coming, because that is my best. I think I would agree. Pushing buttons in the elevators of others has to be the best thing you can do. And you're right. Like, I didn't even know that it went to that floor. You're like, let me get you up to that floor.
Yeah. Like, how do you know? You've never seen a model. I just like figured it out on my way up. But like, if you're not fortunate enough to even get in the elevator, what do you do?
I love that. Like, and you're right. Community colleges are, when you have the chance, and I talk to a lot of marketing professionals, I'm like, go speak at community colleges. Don't just go to the big colleges and the big names. Like, go speak at the community colleges, because you don't understand. You can open a door with a certificate in this industry and do amazing. And people are so fixed on a 4-year that I'm like, go talk to community college kids. They're creative. There's so much there.
Trade schools. I think like, I feel like there's just so much emphasis on 4-year schools, but talent is everywhere.
Everywhere. And the cost, I'm like, you're going to get someone who's probably not in debt the same way. And when you're not in debt and you're not scared, it can also help you to think your creativity and innovation could be in a whole different place. So I feel like, love that. More support for that group as well. All right. And very last question, or I have 2 more, even though I said rapid fire. Okay. You have 3. I know you said you weren't selfish, but we're going to do it. So you have $300. You cannot gift it. It is only something you can spend on yourself. Purely selfish. What are you spending it on?
Food,
right? A good dinner.
I'm going to go out. I'm going to have a good time. I would say food and entertainment. I would, have a good night out.
Yes, that's a good answer. See, experiences. And you're in LA too. There's some good food out there.
Yeah. And like changing every day.
I know. Their fusion culture is fascinating to me. I'm like, what new fusions can you come up with in LA?
Mm-hmm.
And very last question. Now I'm at the last question. Would your 12-year-old self think you're cool?
I think so. And I think my 12-year-old self would be like, oh, I knew I'd do all this stuff. Like, I've always kind of had a very strong sense of self and not really knowing where I would be. I was just talking to my husband about this the other day. Like, I don't think I could have imagined what it looked like, but I think in my like heart of hearts, I knew that I would be successful.
I love that. I love when people answer yes. Whenever they hem and haw, I'm like, yes, your 12-year-old self would think you were cool. Of course, look where you're at. So.
My 12-year-old self was pretty cool, so I feel like you can only grow from there.
Right? Well, all right. So how can we reach you, find you, engage? What's something exciting you want to talk about your business? The floor is yours.
So Multi-Media, I'm on Instagram, of course, because that's where I spend my time. Also LinkedIn as well. I have a website, multi-media.com. I'm also working on a documentary that I'm hoping that we'll be able to finish and release this year called Deliver Us. And it focuses on the Black maternal crisis in America, but through the lens of midwives. And so we've been able to follow several midwives around the country and focus on their stories and their challenges as well. But really leading with hope. And you can find that at deliverusdoc.com.
I will have all of those in the show notes. That we had a guest previously who's training to be a midwife, so it was a big topic of discussion about the journey. So it has no bearings on wealth. It just it's like it isn't. It's that is a good one. I can't wait to watch that.
Yeah, I'm excited.
All right. Well, go ahead.
No, I said we've been working on it for several years, so I'm excited to get it out to the world.
A labor of love, no pun intended, but definitely a labor of love to get it out. Well, thank you so much. I knew it was going to be a good conversation. I'm like, this is going to be a good one. So thank you so much for being a guest, coming on, giving me a peek into your life, your career journey. I'm hopefully we'll send a lot of folks your way because you're doing impactful work. And so I'll have all the good ways to reach you in the show notes. But thank you. This has been an absolute wonderful conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having this platform for people to talk about what they do, but also spread information and awareness and talk about the culture.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. More to come.